18th. And before we do that, just mention that permission to film the meeting has been requested and permitted. Any individuals not wishing to be filmed should take this opportunity to move from the sidelines of the camera, which is located over there at the corner of that wall. So with that, just ask for a motion to approve the agenda, please. Councillor Valerian, Councillor Janko, all in favor? That's carried. 2 sets of minutes to adopt. Special council meeting on March 3rd and regular council meeting on March 3rd as well. I'm going to just ask for a motion to adopt those minutes, please. Councillor Lumley, Councillor Valerian, in favor? And that's carried. Welcome, Charlie and Leonora. Gregory. Get it straight, Will. You want to say a few words to us before we read the proclamation?
Sure.
Yeah. There's a microphone there.
Thanks very much, Mayor. I just want to thank the community of Gibsons and the Sunshine Coast for really supporting the International Naturally Autistic People Awards, now known as the Anchor World Autism Festival. We just came back from Edinburgh last October, whereby 16 people in a delegation for Canada, 8 from the Sunshine Coast, representing the Sunshine Coast, went to Edinburgh. And it was a very, very successful event. So we're going to be in Vancouver this year, and our kickoff is on the 2nd of April on World Autism Awareness Day, which is what we do every year. It'll be the first year we're doing our kickoff outside of the Sunshine Coast. Recently, our magazines, if you would like some there, some there, some people who are business advertisers in our magazines on the Sunshine Coast have looked at our magazines and were absolutely shocked to see how much support we've had from the Sunshine Coast, from community service providers to businesses to the municipalities and just individuals, and it's quite remarkable. These magazines go all over the world to 23 countries, now 28 countries, every embassy and consulate and politicians such as the High Commissioner in London and other such MPs involved with our event. This year our magazine will be a young lady called Kira Cassidy, who performed in Edinburgh. She's on the cover. And our poster will have 2 of the young ladies that went to Edinburgh, Kira and Ella, for our World Autism poster that goes all over the world. So good on the Sunshine Coast for producing such great talent and allowing us to showcase it on the world stage. And we have one other thing that my husband wanted me to mention, is we've just purchased a few acres of land in Gibsons, and it'll be our last legacy for the autistic community to bring international people to the coast and to support young people to have mentors and peers who are very successful on the international stage to come and work with them and teach them some artisan work and agriculture, what other things, Charlie? Technology, the arts. So we're launching it. It'll take 2 years to develop phase 1, and it'll be called Anchorland Farm. Pardon me, Anchorland Farm. Can't forget the farm. So thank you very much, everybody, for your support.
Thank you, Leon. I'll just read the proclamation. Whereas the number of people on the autism spectrum average 1 in every 110 births, whereas people on the autism spectrum come from every country throughout the world, regardless of race, religion, or culture, and whereas we diligently work to address discrimination and reshape attitudes towards our most vulnerable citizens and family members, and whereas our understanding of autistic people is growing such that today many autistic children and adults are able to lead happy and productive lives, and whereas we recognize the importance of providing avenues for autistic individuals to demonstrate their abilities, talents, and gifts so that they may be accepted as fully participating members of our communities. And now therefore, I, Wayne Rowe, Mayor of the Town of Gibsons, do hereby proclaim April 2nd as World Autism Awareness Day and the official kickoff for the ANCA World Autism Festival to be held in Vancouver, British Columbia during October, Canada's National Autism Awareness Month. And on a personal note, I congratulate you for your passion, and I know how much you put into this, and thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And say hello to your son, Lori.
I will. I think we're going to stay for a little bit.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll move on to delegations, and we have Mr. McKeever going to speak to us about the Sea-to-SkyMarine Trail.
Mayor Rowe, members of council, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this evening, and a special thanks for this terrific turnout you've arranged for the presentation. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. I see you've got a busy agenda, so we'll move right into it, and I will try to keep it as brief as possible. As mentioned, my name is Gordon McKeever. I'm here on behalf of the Recreation Sites and Trails BC Department of Provincial Government.
To the mic.
Oh, very good. Okay. Is this on? How's that? Better? All right. So, as I said, I'm here on behalf of Rec Sites and Trails BC to present the Sea-to-SkyMarine Trail, a concept that I hope you will find both interesting and exciting. This presentation is going to cover the vision of the project, the partners involved, and other stakeholders. Highlight what I think is a very unique opportunity at this point in time for a project like this. The benefits, requirements of a marine trail network, just what it takes to make one. How we've met those requirements, the steps to completion between now and when we hope to have it all done in time for ribbon cutting in June. Future plans for the project, and of course an invitation to the town of Gibsons and an explanation of how you could participate and hopefully make the most of it for your community. So I know you're not supposed to read PowerPoints, but I'm going to read this because this first sentence makes the most sense. So the whole idea is to create a marine trail network in Howe Sound, allowing multi-day camping trips for users of self-propelled watercraft. So it's basically a kayak network of camping sites around the Sound. This was driven by two concurrent but separate priorities. Recreation Sites and Trails BC, the regional rec officer, saw a real opportunity to develop additional public recreation in Howe Sound. And at the same time, I've also been managing the Sea-to-Sky Trail, which is a regional trail project led by the SLRD, similar, I believe, to your Sunshine Coast Trail, meter-and-a-half arterial trail, about 180 kilometers long, moderate grade. It's become part of the Trans-Canada Trail Network, and that was quite embraced, but it had a caveat. We had to connect with the rest of the Trans-Canada Trail. Coming from Squamish, the route along Howe Sound land route was just far too hard. So we decided to take to the water. The precedent was already there. On the Trans-Canada Trail, there are what they call blue ways, which are rivers and lakes that connect land pieces of trail right across the country. This will be the first saltwater section, the first saltwater blue way on the Trans-Canada Trail in the country. Partners, as I mentioned, Rec Sites and Trails BC is the lead agency. Squamish Nation's on board. I mean, their involvement with this body of water is deep and long. BC Parks, a great organization called the BC Marine Trails Network. This is not-for-profit who've tasked themselves with creating marine trail networks like this throughout British Columbia. Trans-Canada Trail, as mentioned, they do have a priority to finish their trail project by 2017, which will be the 25th anniversary and Canada's 150th anniversary. Once complete at 21,000 kilometers, it will be the largest trail network in the world. Of course, the two regional districts, the LRD and the SCRD, between the two of them, they host most of the parks and recreation sites. As well, we've got stakeholders including the access points, District of Squamish, West Vancouver, Horseshoe Bay, Gibsons, Bowen Island at Snook Cove, and in Area F, we have McNair Creek Park. Other communities around the Sound are going to benefit from this, as well as businesses like kayak outfitters and tour operators specifically, as well as other businesses, primarily at the public access points, such as Gibsons. This is a very special time for a project like this. We've got a body of water, given its proximity to Vancouver, that is just strangely underutilized for public recreation compared to other coastal waters, especially in the mid and northern part. And I think the big part of that is that there have been many pollution issues throughout the Sound over the decades and decades. 3 of these major, most egregious point sources have been remediated, including Britannia Mine, wood fiber, and the Nexon chemical plant in Squamish. As a result, the ecosystem is rebounding. We've got gray whales feeding the Squamish estuary for the first time in living memory, the orcas, the dolphins. These large mammals are a clear indication that the whole ecosystem is getting healthier and healthier. It's a very positive time for the Sound. I think the benefits are genuine and diverse. Of course, the existence of a major new free recreation amenity surely will hold good value for your citizens and others around the Sound. There's a solid economic benefit to the communities and to the province from tourist and local use. Regional visitors and much further afield will be coming to take advantage of this opportunity. There's an environmental benefit. You tend to cherish more what you actually experience, and being out there, I believe that the environmental stewardship towards that body of water will only improve. As well, we'd like to see a social benefit by developing an interpretive signage program, focusing on both natural and human histories, but especially on First Nations. Now, there's 2 metrics to understand about a kayak network like this. One is that kayaks more or less travel at walking speed, about 4 kilometers an hour, plus or minus, depending on currents and winds. And 2 to 4 hours is a good day's paddle for most kayakers. So that means that the next stop should be within about 12 kilometers or less. Sea kayakers are very self-sufficient. They're used to carrying all their own water. Absence of toilet facility is the norm, not a hardship. Overnight wilderness backpacking would be the closest, and like backpackers, they really have a great respect for the natural environment. Kayak campers are not beginner paddlers. There's a lot of very unique and special gear, skills, and knowledge required. You don't start kayaking by going camping, unless you're in a guided group. At the end of the day, all they need is a safe landfall and a place to pitch a tent. So how to meet these needs? Well, first we look at the Sound, and there's 3 existing camping spots at the 3 provincial parks nearby here on Keats Island. We've got Halkett Bay on Gambier and Porto Cove on the mainland. Not nearly enough to meet the metrics, the requirements of the network. So over the past 5 years, many days have been spent touring the shoreline throughout the Sound. We ended up with a short list of 15 sites. 6 of them fell off the map after reviewing Crown leases and cadastral drawings. These had to be on Crown land. And 9 went forward to the referral process. 2 didn't make it, so at the end of the day, we created 7 new sites. Then you add the access points at Gibsons, at McNair Creek Park just south of Port Mellon, Snug Cove, Horseshoe Bay, Porto Cove, and Squamish, and now you have a network. These lakes are all within a day's paddle of each other. Once you get into the thick of it, so north of Bowen and south of Porto, you've got 4, 5, 6 opportunities within a day's paddle. What to do between now and when we want to open it to the public? Signage is important. We're designing a large map sign. The sites will be identified with recreation site signage, as you see in the lower right corner of the screen. We have the Squamish Nation has provided us with place names for all of the sites, all of the elements of the network, so that will be proudly displayed. There'll also be some do's and don'ts, a site orientation to explain it's a rough site, pack in, pack out, etc. This is underway right now. The map sign is a large sign that will be about 3 feet wide, 4 feet tall. These will be at all the access points and the provincial parks and the new recreation sites. We also have to prep the rec sites, make them safer, remove the hazard trees, etc. We need to clear the tent sites, level them, install the signage, and 5 of the 7 sites are actually quite rocky. We're going to have to clear a landing channel about 2 meters wide, the length of the intertidal zone, to create a safe landfall for the kayaks. The goal is to have it all done by the middle of June. We would like to hold concurrent ceremonies at Squamish, Horseshoe Bay, and Gibsons. The 14th is working out best for most parties, but it looks like Gibsons may be deferred to June 28th. I've just met with people here that were working on it through the Chamber of Commerce on the opening ceremonies. There's a committee been formed to start moving this forward. The exact location, the attendees, the content is yet to be determined, but we'd love to see a lot of watercraft out there. We'd like to see the dragon boats. We'd like to see the Squamish Nation war canoes. We'd like to see, we'd like to make it a big splash. And we're going to start a very intensive media press, media coverage, most of which will really be reaching out and beginning after we've had a chance to present all the stakeholders like this, likely around the 1st of May. Now for the town of Gibsons, future plans. Yes, I'm moving ahead of myself. We are exploring additional sites to enhance the network. We would, as I mentioned previously, like to develop interpretive signage to enhance the user experience. We'd like to see the sites improve beyond their initial rough state with raised tent platforms, more tent sites if required, composting toilets, that sort of thing. And it's entirely likely that we will reach out for sponsorship to enhance these sites. It would be to the benefit of paddling clubs. It would be to the benefit of kayak outfitters and tour operators to make these sites better. We'd be happy to recognize that effort, but we're doing this really on a song. As far as how the town of Gibsons can participate, we greatly appreciate if you see fit to pass a motion of support for the Sea-to-SkyMarine Trail concept. We would like permission to install a map sign at or near your public wharf to identify it as an access site to the network. We would like your permission to use your community logo on that sign so that it can be demonstrated that you are a part of this project. And of course, we'd like to see you, as you may, to encourage and support the grand opening ceremony plans. As I said, the Chamber is running point on this, but I'm sure public amenities, etc., might be appropriate, and in whatever way you can see fit to support it would be appreciated. And even more important, it would be great to attend and/or participate in the ceremony. 28th of June, mark it on your calendar. And if you are attending, please let us know so that we can acknowledge your presence and thank you for your attendance.
Great. Thank you, Mr. McKeever. It looks like a very exciting project. Any questions or comments from council? Did you, Councillor Valeria?
Thank you for that. It ties in well with a lot of discussions we're having about how sound, environmental effects, and recreation potential. I just wanted to ask about safety. I'm reminded of the accident a few years ago crossing from the east side of House Sound to Anvil Island, and I think even the most experienced paddlers probably could use a reminder that inflow and outflow winds pick up pretty quickly, so it would be, I'm assuming that that's been thought about.
The website, there's only so much information you can put on the sign, and signs tend to get stale dated, so the website will be hosted on the BC Marine Trails Network site at bcmarinetrails.org. They'll have a special section on the Sea-to-SkyMarine Trail. We'll also have our own URL that will point to that site, sea-to-skyMarinetrail.ca. A lot more in-depth information is going to be there. At the end of the day, kayaking is a no-risk sport. The waters are public, and most of the accidents don't happen on the land. Certainly, the conditions on the Sound can be volatile. It's a very large body of water. You don't really appreciate it until you get out there in a little kayak with your backside around water level, and you see just how big it can be. The southerly is a pretty normal feature with the thermal effect as it comes up around midday. Sometimes you get a pretty wicked wind blowing, but most of the Squamish winds are in the winter type time of year. You know, the worst of the northerlies. But yes, it is at the end of the day, it is no risk sport.
Councillor White? A question for you, Mr. Mayor, and that's about the invitation to council that's been made here. Will that automatically go to our next agenda for consideration, or do we need to put forward a motion to ask for a staff report or anything like that? What's the next step?
I don't think we need a motion on that. But in terms of the issue of the sign, you will need to talk to yourself or Andre, okay? Just to see what you have in mind, Mr. McKeever, and so see what's possible, because we also have to deal with the port, the harbor authority as well, depending on what sort of placement might be considered.
Other than the size of the sign, which is being designed right now, I have no preconceptions about where to put it. Whatever's logical that fits into your community.
Okay, so we just have that discussion with the CAO, and the chamber is organizing a sort of kickoff event for this area, so we said.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll communicate with them.
Any motion of support can come to our next.
Well, I see what you're saying. Yes, yeah, we don't generally do any delegation. So yes.
So I'm just wondering if it will automatically appear on the agenda or we need to.
Manny?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think one suggestion is I can prepare a short report for our next meeting, just addressing these three issues and how we're going about them and the status of it. That makes it easy.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. McKeever. I appreciate you coming.
Thank you very much for your time. Have a great evening.
Any inquiries at this point? Any further opportunity? Okay, 8.1. Just a motion to receive the minutes from the special committee of the whole meeting of February 23rd. Councillor Sanjanko, Councillor White, all in favor, and carried. 8.2. Before we move to the motion on that, just by sort of general overview, the effect of what's being proposed here and the bylaws that we'll be seeing later this evening is that the will result in an increase in water revenues to the town on the 2015 plan of 11.3%. Now these changes will take effect starting April 1st, correct? And so the first time that you'll see any increase in sort of water rates will be in the invoices that come out in October. And this is it's part of a plan that began a couple of years ago. It's designed to continue to raise sufficient revenue to operate and maintain and replace both our water and sewer systems. And also, we're working towards rate equity amongst the users of the water system to fairly distribute the costs among our users. The ultimate goal is to make sure that we have financial sustainability for the water and sewer utilities in the town. So with that sort of overview, I just ask for a motion to receive the minutes and for the recommendations that are set out there at 8.2.1. Councillor White, Councillor Valerian. Further, all in favor then? And that's carried. 8.2.2 is a direction to staff to amend the water regulation bylaw, which again will show up later in the agenda, to refine the wording relating to water leak adjustments, and it's just to, again, make sure that any leaks in the system are appropriately compensated for, shall we say. So, motion then to, for that recommendation. Councillor Lumley, Councillor White, you have some comment or anything else? Okay. Anything further? And all in favor then? And that's carried. Okay, any inquiries at this point?
Thank you. Mayor and Council, this inquiry is regarding the written submissions for the OCP public hearing. I have a very short context and 2 questions. From a review of all the written submissions, there were many more submissions than writers. For example, 4 individuals submitted 29 letters, which included form letters. 16 individuals submitted 5 form letters each. 9 individuals submitted 4 to 5 form letters each with no legible signatures. 7 individuals submitted 4 form letters, and 18 further individuals submitted 2 to 3 form letters. All of the above were opposed to the updates. In contrast, those written submissions in favour of the updates submitted 1 letter each in their own words. My first question is, can it be assumed that Council has recognised the extensive use of form letters and multiple submissions and assessed their value accordingly?
I'm sure that individual councillors have taken that into account.
And my second question is, will Council require individuals to clearly state their full name and residential address in all future public hearing submissions?
Yes, that did sort of slip by to some extent in that public hearing, that we didn't always, or at least I didn't always remind people to give us their address, so that's something we'll try to be more alert to in the future. Thank you. Okay, any further inquiries at this point? Okay, so we've got a couple of items of correspondence. Just have a motion to receive those, please. Councillor Sanjenko, Councillor Valeria, in favor. That's carried. Is there any comment on those? Councillor White?
I'd like to make a motion on 11.2 piece of correspondence regarding the declaration of the right to a healthy environment, and that is simply that staff report to Council on the viability and process for pursuing this declaration of right to a healthy environment in the town of Gibsons.
And the motion's in order. But just also note that this is, according to that correspondence, intended to go to UBCM as well for discussion generally. So is there a second for that? Councillor Valeria? Any further discussion on that? Councillor White?
I'll just mention that if this motion passes, I do know that there are some members of the community who are involved in this initiative, and would probably be willing to speak to our CAO about how to connect with the David Suzuki Foundation. So I could refer them to our staff if this motion passes.
Okay, that would be helpful. Anything further? Right, all in favor then? And that's carried. Thank you. Sorry, Annie?
Certainly, thank you. So now just the RCMP correspondence. Certainly, staff is quite prepared to follow up with the detachment, but in the meantime, hearing from Council will not necessarily tonight, some of your considerations on what types of priorities you would like the department to focus on. I'll just follow up with Council after that.
All right, thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that. So if there's any particular items, then members of Council can pass that on to the Chief Administrative Officer. 12.1, this is a staff report regarding the official committee plan update. And just ask for motion to receive that, please. Councillor Valeria, Councillor Santanko. All in favor? That's carried. That takes us to 12.2, which is the bylaw for the updated official community plan. Because of the intense scrutiny that this has had and the amount of time that's spent on it, I felt it appropriate to make sure that I had my thoughts clearly written out. So I will sort of read my statement with respect to this matter, and then hear from other members of council. The bylaw that is before us for final adoption today follows from an initiative of the previous council, which was intended to update the current official community plan, to add new information, and to incorporate new requirements with respect to climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, as well as to simplify the document. An official community plan is a document that provides a statement of objectives and policies to guide decisions on planning and land use management. While it provides guidance, it's not intended to be a static document. It's a living document and should be able to respond to new conditions and circumstances. The current official community plan has already been subjected to 29 amendments. No doubt the proposed plan, if adopted, will be subjected to a number of further amendments. While there appeared to be a large number of written submissions, it was clear from my review of the submissions that there were multiple submissions by the same individuals pertaining to the same content. There were also a number of identical submissions provided on form letters which contained erroneous information. These letters typically contained a statement that the writer was very upset to learn that the development permit area number 5 had been removed from the official community plan, which is quite simply incorrect. If the signatories had taken the time to read the document, they would see that the development permit area number 5 is present in the revised plan. The report from the Director of Planning in tonight's agenda addresses the main points that were raised during the public hearing process and should be carefully considered by those who are willing to separate fact from rhetoric. I'll limit my comment to a couple of the main issues. The question of the height of buildings in the harbor area was prominent in the submissions. Undoubtedly, the application for the George Hotel project influenced those concerns, but it's important to remember that the current process is not about that application and that it will be subjected to its own public process. Many of the submissions in the form letters were based on a misunderstanding that the current official community plan in some way has set a 35-foot height limit for buildings in the harbor area. In fact, there is no policy statement regarding the height limits in the current plan. The proposed plan before us does now have a new policy that states that the height of buildings should be 1 to 2 stories on the higher side of the lot and 3 to 4 stories on the lower side, depending on the slope. In other words, this plan does now provide some guidance for the height of buildings in that area. Exceptions to that would be considered as part of an OCP amendment process on a case-by-case basis. A number of submissions suggested that view protection had in some way been eliminated from the proposed plan. This also is incorrect in that there are clear policy statements in the development permit area number 5 requiring building scale and massing to be designed with careful consideration of the impacts on views from uphill properties. As well, Part 5 of the zoning bylaw remains in place to address view protection. This does not mean that views may not be altered at some time in the future, but indicates that the impact on views is to be considered as part of any development proposal. The report from the Director of Planning adequately addresses the points raised in respect of floor space ratio and moreover notes that the existing residential zones already allow for ranges similar to those in the proposed updated plan. I also feel the need to address the matter of the steering committee, as it was raised by some speakers at the public hearing. The steering committee was a group of volunteers intended to act in an advisory capacity to our staff and consultants. It was only one part of the process, which included open houses, questionnaires, the peace and night sessions, and so on. It did not have any unique authority to approve or veto any part of the proposed plan. Obviously, some members of the committee felt their views were not fully embraced in the new plan, while others were satisfied that reasonable consideration had been given to all views of the members of the committee. Ultimately, it is a council decision, not a steering committee decision, as to whether the plan adequately reflects the input that has been obtained over the past year and a half. Lastly, I must express my disappointment that the odd individual felt it necessary to level unfounded charges of corruption around the process of revising the official community plan. Everything around this process has been open and public. These allegations are an insult to all the members of the council, and quite frankly, an insult to the citizens of this town. As an elected official, we sometimes have to accept that people may say things to or about us that we would never accept in our private lives. I would hope that our citizens will not tolerate this type of behavior and will not accept these types of statements unchallenged and without holding those individuals to account. In conclusion, I will be supporting third reading and final adoption. Hear from other members of council. Councilor White.
I first want to address the mood of the public hearing itself. Most speakers had considered and respectful comments. I always welcome passion as well as some humor. However, Mr. Mayor, I want to inform those who don't know me well yet, even if they think they do, that I take my duty to approach public input with an open mind very seriously. I was there to listen, to be open to influence, and when a handful of people take such opportunities to spread innuendo and perpetuate community divisiveness, those few people putting on a circus will lose my ear. I'm here to focus on the real issues facing our town and its future, and won't be influenced by gossip. Specifically, I heard the word corruption used. This is a serious charge that requires evidence, not a word to describe a situation where you didn't get your way. But I also want to recognize that many more people who are probably not supporters of anyone on this council offered my open mind, respectful, thoughtful, and focused input. This gives me hope, and I thank them for it. The mixed but overall disappointing feelings I have about my first public hearing as a councillor affirm my belief that we need to engage the community promptly about how we can work together to better respect our neighbors' opinions and participate in civil and constructive dialogue. We have such an engaged public in Gibsons that I strongly believe we can do amazing things in this town. Now, to zero in on the OCP update, my position on this has been very challenging to develop. It's gone back and forth, mainly because this endeavor was launched by the previous council. Although I deeply value the hard work that's been done by staff and community volunteers, I remain unconvinced on the timing. It was a strategic priority for the last council, and in my view, the last council should have wrapped it up one way or another prior to the election period taking over. I am certain I wouldn't have supported launching this update at the same time as the George proposal, nor would I have supported extending the process past the spring of 2014 when it was supposed to finish. The former council directed and lived this entire process and was exposed to all the input that came forward from the public. Some councillors were even members of the steering committee. And yet here I am coming in at the end of the game and being asked to grant final approval. This is the job I signed up for, but I still want to explain that I'm here with a very different perspective that I may have had if I'd been here from the beginning. And as a non-councillor, sorry, Mr. Mayor, you at the Committee of the Whole today, you encouraged me to make a half-an-hour speech, so I'm about to deliver. As a non-councillor during the consultation process, I developed a solid impression from what was said at meetings that the work being done had nothing to do with the George proposal, because that project had already been brought forward under the current OCP and would need to stay under the current OCP for fairness and continuity. But it is now abundantly clear to me from the submissions we've received that many citizens of this community do not share this impression, whether they're skeptical of the George or supportive of the George. So I've definitely been influenced by virtually everyone, it seems. I'm still uncertain about how this consensus has evolved, but I now get the impression that so many people have assumed that the new OCP is all about the George, that this public demand has basically become reality to our town. However, another key reality I'm certain about is there is a tragic irony to most of the comments we've received. I'm just not sure how the tragedy part is going to play out yet. The irony is many people have been led to believe that the current OCP has more clear, specific, and restrictive language in the updated OCP, when in fact the opposite is true. I take the new proposed harbor area policy of generally 1 to 2 stories very seriously, because it would be preposterous under this language for any council to allow the entire tourist accommodation zone, and perhaps more, to vary from that vision and still say it was following the OCP. The language states that in order to make such exceptions, council would need to go back to the public and justify an OCP amendment, which frankly is something I have little interest in doing on the heels of this full OCP update. If an amendment is necessary for the George, for example, it should be part of this package before us this evening. I'd be more likely to support both propositions if it were. Despite common misconceptions, nowhere in the current OCP does it say anything about a 35 feet height limit. In fact, the current reference is to the zoning bylaw, including view protection taking precedence, and has no teeth as part of an OCP because it is merely referring to specific language that is written in the bylaw, not in the OCP. And the bylaw is directed by the OCP, not the other way around. One only needs to look at how the current George proposal has already been approved for form and character to realize how influential these references to the zoning bylaw have been. They may as well state the town of Gibsons has a zoning bylaw. A strong statement made at the public hearing that sticks in my mind is that if the OCP update passes, the town will have nothing left to negotiate in regards to the George. I don't necessarily agree with where it's coming from, but I agree with the statement because I see the current OCP and recent, sometimes very different interpretations of it, supported by the previous council, to be wide open when it comes to the harbor area. The current OCP, the one that reminds us we have a zoning bylaw like any other local government in the world, gives us loads to negotiate. However, if the new language that refers to 1 to 2 stories goes forward and applies to the George, we will have far less flexibility than we do currently. My personal reading, even when qualified by the word generally, is that to honor the will of the community as expressed in the OCP, I'd have a hard time accepting a residential-only condominium building exceeding the general height restrictions, and that furthermore, going to 4 times this height as a general exception for tourist accommodation, presumably again through having to make an OCP amendment, would be a tall order, both figuratively and literally. I accept this is the direction council received from public input during the update process, but at that time I was also under the impression this process would not apply to the George. I'm personally committed to negotiating a George that better fits the scale of the harbor, because that's what I heard from most voters, even if I don't believe those voices were well represented at last week's public hearing. The problem is that I feel that in regards to the George, this update will once again lock us into all or nothing, a selection process that hundreds of residents have told me they find unacceptable. In this case, the all would be punching through an OCP amendment, bypassing the language we're being asked to agree to here today, and the nothing would be adhering to the 1 to 2 story statement, thereby making the project impossible. Given these two undesirable choices, I would feel ethically obliged to take the latter approach thereby quashing my real hope, which is a negotiated compromise. So in conclusion, I have to honor the logical impression gleaned from the start of this update process that the George proposal cannot start out with one OCP and have the OCP switched around partway through. Allowing these processes simultaneously was a regrettable decision and only ends up significantly complicating a decision-making process that has already been troubling and divisive. Therefore, I could support postponing third reading until the George process is concluded. If that's not possible logistically, or through a lack of support here at Council, I will be open to supporting amendments to this update, but unless I hear something really convincing, then I'm open to hearing everyone's arguments, but especially an explicit reassurance that the update will not apply to the George proposal. I think I'll have to oppose third reading and adoption due to my concerns for bad timing. As many have said, timing is everything.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Valeria?
Thank you. First thing, I just wanted to commend staff and the steering committee for a much improved document that provides increased aquifer protection, recognizes that we must plan for climate change, and provides clear guidance for managed growth in our town. I was a member of the OCP steering committee. I didn't see it as a cauldron of political intrigue. What I saw was a group of people given a challenging task, got down to business, and got the job done. Likely no one got everything they wanted, myself included, but it wasn't an OCP authorship or an OCP editing committee, it was a steering committee. A remarkable amount and breadth of information was considered. Meetings were expertly chaired, and I think a fair balance was struck between public sentiment, committee input, and the planner's professional responsibilities and professional judgment. I thank all of the residents who made thoughtful and passionate submissions to the public hearing. I listened carefully to all the potential pitfalls as well as the support, because I share many of the same concerns. The rapid and uncontrolled urbanization, or worse, in my opinion, suburbanization, a row of high-rises on the harbour front, erosion of charm and character. I tried to pull pretty hard on the logic of each of these threads, and I didn't find the holes that other people fear are there. What I found is that, as has been pointed out, the zoning bylaw is still referenced. The recently adopted harbour plan was respected, and based on public input, expectations regarding building height have been added to a document that didn't have them previously. As to whether height is in feet or in stories, I think we're splitting hairs. Staff and council would exercise swift judgment if they received an application for a building full of made up of 20-foot stories, or 6.5 meters if you prefer. A comment was made at the public hearing that more people settling in Gibsons will cost us all more money. Simply put, I believe that density is the best solution to this problem. You build on existing infrastructure, encourage innovative architecture and environmental design. If we want a vibrant pedestrian culture, reduce environmental footprint, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, all policies that are in this plan, density is the way to do it. Nonetheless, there are no radical density increases in this updated OCP, and I think that the FSR maxima are pretty prescriptive. Many OCPs use words like general, typical, approximate. I'm not sure that the planner would have chosen them, but he decided to listen to the steering committee, which was part of the process. I think an OCP can only prescribe to a certain point, and then council must be allowed to do their work and consider each case on its merits relative to the public interest. We could probably tinker with the document forever, and I've considered a number of amendments. On reflection, most of these would be only edits and simply cosmetic. There's two exceptions to this. One is option number 1 specified in the staff report about the information note, deleting a few words in that. And the other is a discussion of the removal of the word generally in the policy on village scale and character. I think we either mean 1 to 2 stories, possibly up to 3 to 4, or we don't. We need to say what we mean. People who work every day with OCPs know they can apply for an amendment. I don't think we need to make that any more open than it already is. Editorial changes might alleviate concerns about the relationship with the OCP and the George application, or they may not. The timing is unfortunate, but I'm open to ways of trying to separate them in the public perception if it helps to restore trust. I think if we had to wait for one major initiative to be finished, to be completed, before we start working on another, we wouldn't get a whole lot done. So in the end, it's the developer's job to try and push the envelope and the town's job to advance the best interests of the town. I believe this document, with the couple of minor amendments I mentioned, serves the best interest of the town, and once this discussion is finished, I plan to support third reading and adoption.
Thank you. Councillor Sanjanko?
As I said before, I was grateful to sit on the OCP Update Committee, grateful for the input, our staff and consultants' work on the project, and grateful for the leadership shown by our chair, Pam Robertson, who led us through what was at times a challenging process, yet in my view a process that overall exceeded my expectations. I hold the same opinion as our chair that all of our committee recommendations were considered by staff and the consultant, and the vast majority of them incorporated into this document. Specifically speaking, I am also satisfied with the insertion of a new policy limiting development within the harbour area to 4 stories depending on the slope of the land. Anything else will trigger an OCP amendment. Support for this policy at our committee meeting was unanimous. I too initially had concerns that our land use table for resident tourist accommodation did not set up guidelines as to the FSR. However, after listening to the reasoning behind staff's recommendation not to include these guidelines in the OCP, 3 very unique parcels of land better dealt with on a case-by-case basis, I am now satisfied. From day one, there's been a range in the perspective or understanding of the scope of this project. Some viewing it as a complete OCP review and others an OCP update. The project has already cost our taxpayers nearly $20,000 more than the $60,000 budgeted. I recommend that we move forward and complete this project while being open that further work may unfold to guide its implementation.
Thank you. Councillor Holman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I'll reiterate Jeremy's comments, thanking staff. Andre put quite a big report together very quickly, so commendable. I haven't been, on council for very long, and I really like the, if people don't know, the staff work very hard and they get things done pretty quickly. And not being on council before, not being part of the steering committee, I was at a disadvantage, but I did a lot of research. I spoke to various people from the steering committee, and I also took Pamela Robertson's submission into account, and my conclusion was it was a fair process. The density issue, well, that only makes sense to me, and part of me being, I like to exercise a lot of common sense and a lot of my analysis, and urban sprawl is a loser for any community. It's going to cost the community twice as much to maintain. It only makes sense to me that we would increase density on our existing infrastructure, which also we're going to try and replace over the next few years. It's going to be a daunting task. So that was clearly making sense to me. And then the other thing that didn't make sense to me was why we would overlap our bylaws with the OCP. And I clearly think that the amendments to it, as far as height being 2 stories, I agree. I support this, but I would like to see the word generally taken out, as Jeremy's already said. And I think it provides 2 stories at the street level and 3 to 4 on slope. I think that's a pretty good statement as far as height is concerned. I will support the third reading and the adoption of this with that just one minor change. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to need a mover here. There's a couple of changes you've suggested, Councillor Valeria. And I think, to be clear, the changes that you're suggesting is on page 21 of the agenda. Well, actually, but it's in the plan as well. But 21, the bottom of the page where it talks about the addition of this 1 to 2 stories, 3 to 4 stories, and so on. You're suggesting the word generally be omitted? Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd make the motion that the word generally be omitted and also the words to this general guideline be omitted. So I would read the whole clause. In order to maintain a village scale and character in Gibson's Harbor area, building heights should be limited to 1 or 2 stories on the higher side of the lot and 3 to 4 stories seen from the lower side of the lot, depending on the degree of slope. Exceptions may be considered through an OCP amendment on a case-by-case basis.
Exceptions to this guideline?
My part of this motion would be to remove exceptions to this general guideline. If we've removed the word generally, then I see the general guideline as.
So just read exceptions to this may be considered through an OCP amendment on a case-by-case basis. Okay. All right, I'm personally not seeing anything in that affects the intent of that section as far as I'm concerned. Since it still makes it clear that that's sort of the general direction, but that as is always the case, amendments can be considered through through an OCP amendment process. Okay. And the other one you wanted to revise is on page 22 of the agenda to delete with respect to the information note that appears in the plan. I think it was on page 115, I believe, where rezoning is not proposed. Quite frankly, that really, I don't have a problem with that because it doesn't mean anything. It's just, I think a lot of people misinterpreted what that means. So it just simply is directing people to Part 5 of the zoning bylaw. So I don't have a difficulty with that. So your motion then is with that amendment, with those 2 amendments, to give, sorry, Andre, do you have a comment?
So just to be clear, is that option 1 in the report that we're talking about here, or something else? Okay.
Option 1 where it says information note, yes. So the line where it says where a rezoning is not being proposed, that would be taken out. The rest of it would stay in, and just reads applicants should also refer to the Part 5 view protection and massing regulations set out in the Town of Gibson zoning bylaw. That's simply an information note that appears on page 115, which, quite frankly, is of virtually no consequence as far as I'm concerned. But, so that's fine. So your motion then is with those changes to move 3rd reading and then adoption. Is that correct?
I think I'd leave it to other councillors to make other amendments before we go directly to 3rd reading. My motion would be just simply those 2 amendments.
Okay. Are there any other amendments that are being proposed?
Sorry, I guess on procedure, are we, so you're putting forward that we move the entire bylaw with the amendments rather than vote on the amendments separately then?
Yeah, so basically what we'll be doing is, help me out here, Selena.
The motion would read that you're giving it 3rd reading as amended to remove the word generally and capture those 2 points.
Okay, so let's do it in 2 stages then. Yes. All right. So that would be the motion for 3rd reading to give it 3rd reading with those changes that we've just identified. Okay?
If I may, that's fine. I assume that if there's any others, then there can be amendments to that amendment.
Just for a point of clarification, if you want to leave it open for other amendments before you give a 3rd reading, then you just pass a motion on the 2 amendments. No reading.
Just to be on the safe side, I would like to make a motion to just make those 2 amendments for now.
All right, let's do that then. Okay, second then, Councilor Santiago, all in favor then? Opposed? So that's carried. That's just for the amendments, okay? All right, so anything?
I'll have to say, we didn't get a chance to discuss the amendments. opposed, I suppose.
So you're opposed?
Amendments, I did have some questions about the amendments.
Okay, go ahead.
Just one is, I'm concerned about, I want to raise the whole generally word, and general word. I'm concerned, was the intention of putting it in there just to make it really clear to people that there's always opportunity for amendments and variances in OCP. I would assume that's the case, and I'm wondering if we're making it less clear now, and it'll be taken out of context again.
I think what everybody needs to really understand is that an application can be made to amend an OCP anytime. And that's why I made the point earlier that the current OCP has been amended 29 times. So we're not taking away anything here. We're simply, that ability always exists. And I've mentioned this before, that under the Community Charter, the Community Charter Local Government Act, correct me if I'm wrong, that council is obligated to consider applications for OCP amendments. It's always open that we got forward. Yes, Councilor Larry.
Maybe a little bit out of order, but I would like to hear staff's comments on removing those general words, if we could.
Okay, Andre, is there anything that you can shed any light on with respect to any implications as regards the request by Councilor Valeria?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the flexibility that is explicitly mentioned here for an OCP amendment is still clearly there. I do think the reading of the text is a little bit different without the words generally. It's a bit more, it firms it up a little bit more, but that's in the eye of the beholder, I think. So it's up to council to make that consideration. From my perspective, either way would work, and I would think would fit what I've heard throughout the process.
Councillor Lumley?
The reason why I wanted it removed because it just seems wishy-washy. I think it just drives the point home that yes, buildings are 2 stories high on that side instead of saying generally. It just kind of makes it, this is what we plan to have instead of this is what we kind of plan to have. You know, that's my general thinking on it. That's why I wanted it.
There you go. All right, so I'm going to go back to, so I'm going to just run this third reading amendment then is that provision, it's being suggested to read, in order to maintain another scale and character in Gibson's Harbor area, building heights should be limited to 1 or 2 stories on the higher side of the lot, and 3 to 4 stories as seen from the lower side of the lot, depending on the degree of slope. Exceptions to this may be considered through an OCP amendment on a case-by-case basis. Okay, so that's the proposal, along with the other deletion of those 2 words on the notation on page 115. Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Valeria. That's second by Councillor Sandino. Any further discussion on that one? If not, all in favor? Okay, that's carried. So that's third reading with those amendments. Are there any other amendments being proposed tonight? So
I just wanted to confirm that was third reading with the amendments?
yes.
Thank you.
What was the amendments?
Amendment. Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. My mistake. My mistake. Okay. All right. Okay. So now the motion should be for third reading as amended. Okay. Councillor Lumley, thank you. Councillor Valeria, thank you. Right. Yeah.
Just say again, I agree with the statements my colleagues have made here too about this OCP, about the work that's been done, the hard work by staff, the hard work by community volunteers, and my concern is just the timing. I don't see. I think unfortunately, it's been inseparable from the George proposal, which has been. I think it's been inseparable to supporters of the George. It seems has taken on that. It's become inseparable to people who are skeptical of the George, and that it seems like it's taken on a life of its own, that connection, and it troubles me. And we'll have to stumble our way through from here, I think, about interconnecting the two, but that's my difficulty.
Yeah, and I understand that, but quite frankly, I don't think we need to prolong the agony. I'm going to ask for a motion for final adoption, please. Councillor Lumley, Councillor Delary, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor White opposed. Yes. Andre Dalton?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just want to verify if the corporate officer, did we take a vote on the third reading?
Yes.
No, actually, we didn't. We had a mover and a seconder, and then Councillor White spoke.
Oh, boy, okay.
So, we are voting on third reading as amended.
Okay. I thought I did.
You had a.
Was moved and seconded?
It was moved and seconded and
Yeah, it
open
was,
for discussion.
but,
Okay, all in favor of third reading is amended. Carried. Opposed?
I thought the motions are moved and seconded, then there's usually debate after that.
I think we're finished. Okay. Am I going to adoption? Okay, motion to adopt, please. Councillor Lumley, Councillor Delary. Any further discussion? In favor? Opposed? Okay, that's carried with Councillor White opposed. Okay, thank you. Okay, 12.3, this was also subject to the same hearing, which was for garden suites, and didn't really have much comment beyond what we've already previously received. This one here at this point is just for third reading. So, third reading, Councillor Valeria. Any discussion on that one? And if not, all in favor? And that's carried. 12.4, bylaw to delegate authority for the Gibson-Council for development permit area to the Director of Engineering. And this is here for the final adoption. Again, motion please. Councillor Lumley, thank you. Second, Councillor Valeria. Any further discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. 12.5, this is for final adoption as well. With the new rates, fees, and charges bylaw for the Gibsons-Council for development permit area. Motion for that as well, please. Councillor Zinchenko, Councillor White, second. Further discussion, all in favor, and that's carried. 12.6, Andre, there's a couple of minor changes that you want to bring to our attention in this before we go to final adoption on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, we added a previous version of the bylaw, different from the third reading version. There's just I think you have the correct version in front of you. There are only minor wording changes that were added at third reading. And for clarification, one of them is on page, I don't have a page for that, it's in the second page of the Schedule H, where there was a reference to a drilling program, but it should read drilling program, so that's a typo. We fix that. And on the third page of that attachment, the Schedule H, we had added some clarifying language about fees for subdivisions, clarifying that what the fee was for the first new parcel created, and then any additional parcels. So that's clarifying text was already in there at third reading, and we'll make sure that the adopted bylaw has that as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, motion to adopt then. Councillor White, Councillor Valeria. All in favor? And that's carried. 12.7 requires unanimous, first of all, resolution to give unanimous consent to first, second, and third reading for the water regulation amendment bylaw. So I have a motion to give first, second, third reading. Councillor White, thank you. Councillor Valeria, all in favor? And that's carried. So 12.8 is the receipt of the Assistant Treasurer report on that, as well as the giving first, second, and third reading to that water regulation amendment bylaw, which was addressed earlier in the meeting tonight. So again, motion for that, please. Councillor White, Councillor Lumley, second. All in favor? And that's carried. 12.9 also requires unanimous consent from council to give first, second, and third reading to the bylaw to revise water and sewer user rates. So first of all, ask for a motion to give first, second. So Councillor White, Councillor Zinchenko, all in favor, and that's carried. 12.10 then is first, second, and third reading for the rates, fees, and charges amendment bylaw for the water and sewer rates. Councillor White, thank you. Councillor Valeria, all in favor, and that's carried. Council reports. Councillor Lumley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended the Chamber of Commerce, their board meeting on March the 13th, and they are having a mini maker fair on May 31st, and it's at Dougal Park, so put that on your calendar. It's a pretty cool event where I guess there's about 80, techies or eggheads that live on the coast that get together, and they've got this fair happening. It's like science and engineering and technology, and these people make all these cool gadgets, and it's good for kids and stuff like that. So they happen all around North America and even in the UK, and I think again, it's in May, so it's off season. It's not a tourist attraction. They're attracting professionals to the coast. It's kind of a non-tourist shoulder season event, and I think as part of the Chamber's role in economic development, it's a really good bonus that they've come up with. My second part of my report is I attended the public hearing on March the 10th, as well as doing my job, listening to information. I did take a couple of thoughts away from the meeting, and I'd like to share those with you. The first thing I took away from the meeting was dismay, or maybe if that's too harsh, is disheartened, I guess. I was disheartened. The hypocrisy of those who purport to have the community interests at heart. I just didn't think it was fair that they would treat fellow community members with such disrespect and disdain. And then the second thing I thought when I left the Legion was pride. I was proud of the town's mayor, and I was proud of council, because in the face of threats and accusations, abusive, combative behavior, I thought the council personified dignity and professionalism. And one thing this council has done from day one, these are your elected leaders, through all our strategic discussions, we've always put good governance on our list, and through the discussion of good governance, we really want to elevate the expectations of ourselves and each other. So I'm encouraged by this, and my hope is that these ideals that we share will eventually trickle down to the truly engaged members of our community. Thank you.
Does that include the eggheads you referred to?
I think they're in Robert's Creek.
It was my pleasure to represent council and the town at the official launch of the progress plan. And just to have a brief talk with the overwhelming number of people in attendance of the things that the town is doing to integrate the plan into what we're already doing, and that some of that is in our OCP. We also had our strategic planning session for council since our last council meeting, which I very much enjoyed. And last evening I attended the Gibsons Landing Harbor Authority board meeting, which I'm getting more used to. Yeah.
You don't like the pizza, do you?
No.
Councillor Valerian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a note that the BC on the Move 10-year transportation plan consultation summary was released today. I haven't read it yet, but it's notable that there's very little comment on ferry service. On that note, the ferry commissioner's report is expected tomorrow on fare caps. And the ferry advisory committee is considering engaging a survey of users of the ferries, and I believe this could be supported on an economic development footing. Attended Library Society AGM, which was informative, and just highlight an upcoming event, March 22nd, Sunday at 2 p.m. This is a a partnership between Deer Crossing, the Art Farm, and the Good Samaritan Christensen Village. It's called Imagination Network. It's a program focused on dementia sufferers, caregivers, and overall community. I think it's a good cross-generational initiative. So that's they're kicking off with a film showing at the Playhouse on Sunday.
What day?
March 22nd. This is coming Sunday, 2 p.m.
Okay. Councillor White.
I usually report, especially with all my SDRD activities. I organize reports on a monthly basis, and my next full report will be coming at the next meeting of council. But I do have an attachment at the end of our agenda package, since it was requested last meeting about the Inja4 application and the dealing, how it's been dealt with at the SCRD. This recommendation that was brought forward on page 1 of 103 was essentially passed with some additions that came through community consultation, and I'll have the full. I think that came through a bit late for the agenda package. That
it's
final.
a late item attached.
Okay, yes, so it's a late item. Yeah. So that's there for council's information. Secondly, just a project that I thought I mentioned, because I just noticed it the last couple of days. I wasn't involved in it, unfortunately, but we should look for it next year, which is the Herring Enhancement Project, which I thought was really exciting. And there's some great photographs of the excellent community work that's been done. And also, I think council received some information today about how the Harbour Landing Authority was involved in helping make it happen, which I think was great collaboration and ties into our strategic plan that we're working on in draft on a couple different levels. So I think it's something we should look out for next year, and it's great work by the community.
Great, thank you. I did attend, it was a Chamber of Commerce social, but it was held at the Gibsons Garden Inn to just introduce the business community to the changes that they've made up there. And I congratulate the owners of the Garden Inn. They've done a terrific job of really upping this, creating an upper scale accommodation here at Gibson. So they've done a great job, and I think they're great corporate citizens. Lastly, I want to mention that we are going to lose our administrative assistant, Tracy Stewart, to the city of Kamloops. I think you're finished at the end of this week, as I recall. Next week. So we're going to miss you. Thank you so much. You've been a real workhorse, and really appreciate it. So good luck to Kamloops. Any last words before we adjourn? If not, ask for a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Blair, Councillor Sanjanko, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.